Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ryan Ride Mechanic channel. How the heck are you doing today? All right, done this once before. I'm going to try it again. I'm going to do a maintenance roundtable video. I've invited two guests to come on today, and we're just going to talk maintenance stuff about maintenance things in parks, rides, general, wherever the conversation may go. So I'm interested in it. I can't wait to see what this brings out and what we could find out about each other and everything else. So I hope you enjoy it too.
Now get ready. Here we go.
So I have my two guests today is Richard and Adrian, both on with me. And yeah, welcome. How are you guys doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. It's a little colder than I like where I am right now, but I'm doing well.
Yeah, same here. Same here. Doing good, but it's cold.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm out here in Omaha, Nebraska. The temperature today was -10 in the morning, and it's sitting at the high was 4 degrees today.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it's like, yeah, it's really cold here. So
Yeah.
but that's kind of normal for us this time of year too. Let's see. We'll start with Richard. Are you currently employed at a park or previous experience?
Currently employed.
Currently employed at a park. Okay. So this is your off season, I take it?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. How about Adrian? Are you currently employed at a park or previous?
Yeah, currently employed.
Okay. And you're off season as well, or is your park open?
Off season quotations.
Okay.
But yeah, we're still open most weekends. But yeah, during the week we're doing all the rehabs and everything else.
Yep. Okay. So that was kind of like when I left my park. We were at we had, like you said, like an off season, but we were still open for the weekends. So we always had that kind of like, yeah, we do everything Monday through maybe Friday, and then it was like Saturday and Sunday we still got to burn the park up for 2 days, and then then take
Yeah.
care of it again the rest of the week. Richard, do you have a forte of rides that you work with, or like I mean, where I was, I pretty much worked on a B&M coaster, two Vekoma coasters, an Intamin coaster. Like my stuff was kind of around the realm of general things. Do you have a handful of rides you're dealing with, or just one or two?
I got a handful. I've only been employed there for a year. I came in mid rebuild season last year, and I started in the main shop, which handled a lot of INTAMIN rides. So I have some familiarity with INTAMINs, and they are a pain in the butt. Oh my god, they are a real pain in the butt. Then over the summer, we run 3 shifts. Summertime, I was on midnights, and I got moved to with the Aero crew, and that's like taking care of Gemini, Magnum, Corkscrew, Mine Ride, Iron Dragon. There's a couple more, can't remember, but those were our inspection rides. Then when the off season hit, they just left me in the Aero shop. So I've been rebuilding Iron Dragon for the past since November.
Nice, nice. Adrian, how about you?
Yeah, we have areas of our park. I have B&M, a Premier, SNS, and then a couple of just assorted flat rides that I kind of touch more often than others.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's when we did roller coaster inspections, it was always you had one or two major rides to work on, or a major ride and then a handful of flat rides, because the flat
Yeah.
rides always just way outnumbered. All
Right.
right. So the first topic, why is Intamin such a pain in the butt? Let's this is Richard's topic, so let's go with
Yeah.
that one. I just
The only thing
okay. So
Xander.
you said like, oh, they're a pain in the butt, and I'm genuinely curious, like, where is that statement coming from? Because I could make that statement on any level about like almost any manufacturer. I could say, designs are hard to understand and get all the information out of. The manual doesn't follow well, or the parts aren't available, or maybe it was just like the design, they wedged this thing right up against that thing and then expect you to work on it. Like,
that was not too much of an issue. The issue was when we put them on the track and go to set them up. I mean, you're talking, our big INTAMIN is Millennium Force. And that is every night, that is adjusting every wheel, every bogey, every night on every train, because you have to have an 8mm ride height. So you're constantly adjusting your eccentrics on your road wheels and making sure you still have your preload on your guides, and your upstops have to be nice and not too firm.
yeah.
And you're always, and it's constant. All three trains every night. Even when you go to set them up on the track before season, you have to have that ride height right. You have to have your brake blade, because you only have a 2mm gap that you have to go through for the eddy brakes.
Mm-hmm.
And Millennium only has one set of brakes, and that's at the end of the run. There are no mid-run blocks. I mean, you're talking, you have a 2mm gap you got to clear with brake blades, and you're on a takeout track on the storage side, trying to line everything up. So, I mean, it's quite a challenge. I mean, they are challenging. I mean, an arrow, you can just,
That's what I love about those rides. The arrows and Vacomas, it's just like plop them down and then let them run.
The old school ones, especially, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hitch them and go. But no, it's just very tedious work, and you're dealing with millimeters in the dark with the headlight on and spiders.
Yeah. Hey, just be thankful it only goes one direction. Because, so I worked on an impulse coaster, INTAMIN impulse coaster, and you're talking about that same, like about 1.5 millimeters clearance on those reaction fins and the stators. And, but you had, 3 fins in the stators that were sitting there. And then you had to get the chassis dead center left to right. It had to be level. It had to be a certain height away from the track. The guide wheels and upstops, everything had to have the right tension on it. But then at the end, you had to point the wheel carriers perfectly straight and keep the tension. Because if one wheel carrier was crooked just by a little bit, it would launch fine in one direction, and then backwards you'd hear those fins would start smacking stators on the way back in. And that was a pain.
Well, it was gone before I got there, but Cedar Point had the Wicked Twister, which was a back and forth INTAMIN with stators. But it almost sounds like Maverick, because Maverick stator launched too.
Yeah, but that's that one's LSM, if I recall.
Yeah.
So on the Premier ride, an LSM on a Premier ride, and that was, I mean, heck, their clearance on that thing was almost 5 millimeters per side on the LSMs. I mean, that thing was loose compared to like an INTAMIN ride, but LSMs were much more powerful. They had the magnets under the train, so in my mind, they were more forgiving.
It's a little bit more forgiving. I mean, you don't adjust the ride height on that one, only the side to sides.
Yeah. So
it's a little bit more forgiving, and it's fun to find what you collect on magnets too when you're inspecting that ride. I have bobby pins, jewelry just stuck to the inside of the magnet. And obviously that has to come out, because I mean you can catch the stator with it.
Yeah. Adrian, what's your favorite?
Well, I think I kind of have a soft spot for the B&M I take care of. I think it's just a breeze. It's everything's nice and big. There's plenty of clearance, and if there's not, they provided a special tool. So it's really nice taking care of that one. We do have a launch coaster that I do a lot of work with, and yeah, that thing's a pain to make sure it's all lined up, and then making sure that it's not too cold, not too windy. Yeah, but yeah, definitely B&M. That's a tough spot for that for sure.
Yeah. When it gets cold and windy, do you guys use like a central weather station to watch temperatures and winds, or like on some of like on my big ride, it had an anemometer in the control room, so like before we dispatched a train, we could see it. I mean, that mainly came into
Yeah.
play after I valleyed a train because it was too windy. That's mainly when we really started using that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a couple of our taller rides. They have anemometers on top of them that we can monitor from the panels at those rides. And then we have 2 weather stations within our park that gets fed back to our base station. So we can just call back to base on the radio, say, hey, what's our temperature and wind speed right now? And then they can just let us know at that point in time.
You get to a point like a threshold where it's like you have to call a manager or somebody and say, hey, what do you think? Can I send this thing or not? Like,
Yeah, especially like my first couple of years, whenever I was first starting out, it was anytime I went to launch, especially the launch coaster, was making a phone call. Hey, just making it your decision. Go, no go.
yeah,
But now that I've worked with it for a few years now, so I'm a lot more comfortable with what it can and can't do. So if it's right on the borderline, it's like, if it's the one that's been on the track for a few months, it'll probably be fine. If it's the one we just put on a couple weeks ago, definitely not. But yeah, it is nice having to make that decision. People call me now, so that's kind of cool.
that is cool. I mean, it's fun when it's interesting when you're starting out, when you're up like in Richard's position and you're like a year into it and you're getting all your getting your sea legs essentially, and then you're asking people, what do I do here, how do I people are giving you advice, and then a couple years later the shoe's on the other foot. You're sitting there going, yeah, this is what you need to do, and here's how you do this, and everyone's coming
Yeah,
to you, what do we do about this, and let me tell you what you do about this.
You
yeah,
see,
exactly.
that's it. Like when I worked industrial maintenance, I had been at a place for quite a while, and people would ask me, I was the go-to guy, and I kind of lost that, and I'm like, okay, now I'm, 50 years old, starting a totally different career choice.
Totally different career choice.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you can relate some of the stuff. A bearing's a bearing, bolts are bolts, nuts are nuts.
Yeah, yep.
It if it comes apart, it's got to go back together.
It's true.
Gearboxes, motors, drives, those are all they're all universal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from industrial to here, I mean, yeah, it was a little bit culture shock because we have a split floor. I can't do electrical, even though I've done it. I'm just strictly mechanical.
Yeah.
About Adrian, you got is your particular park, is it a my park was, when the ride broke down, the ride was broken down. I had to do mechanical, electrical, hydraulic, whatever. The only thing I really didn't do because of the certification was, of course, welding.
Oh yeah.
But how's your park? Do you have independent departments like Richard does, or do you have like mine, where it's kind of just like everyone does everything?
Yeah, we have separate shops. So we have a mechanical and then an electrical shop. Some of our guys do have more familiarity with the electronics and the electrical side of some of our rides, so they get a little bit more leeway to do things as far as the electrical goes for the rides. But definitely high voltage and stuff like that, we just call the electricians, have them come out and take care of that for us.
That makes sense. Well, Adrian, since you're a B&M guy, let's bring up the topic. It seems to be pretty rampant this past year and a half ish. I don't know. I got a lot of questions about it.
Yeah.
Which is the infamous. Well, it's infamous to me. Maybe your first
Yeah.
time hearing about this. The B&M
No.
shake.
Yeah, I know a lot about that with one of our rides that we have. Um, Luckily, ours isn't as bad as what it seems the newer B&Ms are coming out with, which is unfortunate. But I have some theories on different things that could be affecting it, but it's really still kind of up in the air on what's changed through the generations of B&M rides that could be causing it. Is we have two older B&Ms also that don't really have the issue, but everything else about the ride is similar, or at least like especially the wheel carriers. So it's hard to see where exactly the difference is that could be causing the issues.
Yeah. I have a friend he's very intimate with his inverted B&M coaster, and I was asking him some questions just before I made my video on. I was just picking his brain on some stuff, and he said, ours didn't have the shake in it. It was nice and smooth and fine. He's like, and then we redid these bearings, and now it's not fine anymore.
Yeah.
Which is kind of surprising because on like a floorless coaster, or one of the bigger coasters that B&M makes, it looks like they use the large Roth bearing, which is, I don't know what they are, about 400 millimeters
Oh, right.
across on the thing.
Yeah.
And the
Mhm.
inverts tend to use the smaller. Is it a radio? Is it a ball bearing? What do they use on those
I
things?
believe they're tapered bearings. At least I believe that's what ours uses. We do have an invert. I'm not as familiar with that one as I am the our two other B&Ms, but I believe they're tapered bearings.
Tapered roller bearings.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had an inspector send me some pictures of that because, like I said, I don't have that much knowledge of that assembly that close,
Yeah.
and I had someone send me some pictures of it, and I was like, oh, here, this is what it is. So I was
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, that's what it is. But it made sense after looking at it. I was just thinking, like, because I can understand some bearings giving some slop in the train. And it's like, okay, and then you get a
Yeah.
little bit of a shake or a rattle as it's out there. But some of the newer track, it almost looks like they were like redoing a design element almost on the curve. Like, they're making the curve, and
Yeah.
then suddenly the program was just like arc, bend. And you could
Yeah.
like see
It's
it.
a
And
hard shift. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, people riding, and you could just see on the camera,
Yeah.
normal. Yeah,
What?
we get the normal
Yeah.
side to side, okay. And then there's always that one spot where people are like, bang, really far over to one side, and it's like, ow, that
Yeah.
doesn't look nice.
No, and we did some experimenting on our newer B&M that we have. It did have a little bit of that shake, but yeah, nothing as bad as what some of the newer ones are having. Um, and at least the testing that we did with B&M, it kind of improved some things, but you really had to be trying to feel a difference between the modifications they wanted to make versus the existing train that they'd given us. We only could tell because we knew what we did to the train, uh, and it ran that way just fine for a year and a half. But it really still that issue still came back over time.
Hmm. Is this something, I don't know if you could answer or even want to answer? Did your park contact B&M about this once it started feeling that way?
They had actually come to us, uh,
Oh, really? Okay.
so it was uh, just from the ride opening, and I guess they weren't like extremely happy with the results of the ride running, which
Hmm.
brand new it had a little tiny bit of a shake, especially when the trains are empty and it's moving a little slower. Um, so they came out and started trying to do some different things with the trains. So that was all them coming out and wanting to make the ride a little bit better, which it did, but it didn't seem to last very long.
Well, okay. Well, at least you got some product support. I mean, that's good.
Yeah,
That's always
that's
helpful.
Mhm.
Richard, you know anything about the B&M shake?
No, I don't work on B&Ms.
No, that's too bad. You should really work on some B&Ms.
I mean, I've ridden them. I mean, we've got Bellraven, Gatekeeper, Raptor, Mantis, which is now called Rougarou. Think of a couple more, but I can't right offhand. But they are nice rides. I love Gatekeeper because it's buttery smooth.
Let's see, that's a wing coaster, right?
Yeah.
That's a B&M wing coaster. So I've only been on one of those out at Six Flags Great America. It was their X Flight.
Okay.
And it was a very pleasant experience. I was honestly worried about the invert at the top as it rolls over, but it did not feel anything like I was expecting it to. I don't know if that was because of the restraints or whatever, but it felt easy to roll over in.
Maverick, and you take some of those rolls, and they are snappy. I mean, you don't think it's going to be snappy, but it's snappy. You get on Gatekeeper, you get that nice roll. It's like, oh, okay, I guess we're going this way now. It's just like, just kind of meanders.
I was kind of bummed out. I saw on that on Maverick there was that one element over the water that they took out that was I guess it was supposed to be like it looped over and then turned the other direction.
It was a Heartline roll.
Heartline roll. It started out in there and then they took it out, I think it was. That looked like it was really cool. I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. But I understand it's like doing things with the human body and then suddenly going another direction. It worked on paper, but I guess not in real life.
No. Xander is the only one that wrote it with the Heartline roll still in it.
Oh, yeah?
The Heartline roll is no more. They actually cut it up and sold it as memorabilia.
See, why don't parks do stuff like that? I mean, so I'm watching the saga coming out of Six Flags New Jersey where they're taking out like a quarter of the park right now, including King Dakar. It's one of those things that's like, man, I know it would cost somebody a lot of money, but you could take parts of those tracks and you could give them to a small shop. You know, you don't need a person certified in a process or anything, and literally cut slices into the track and then sell them. I mean, the company could make so much money. Heck, they could probably make the cost of the dismantling of that ride back.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's what they did with the Heartline roll. I believe it was $199 for one. Then they had a limited edition number of them signed by Xander himself. Those went for $299.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, they sold out of all of them.
I bet.
Yeah.
But they're all authenticated and they were put in they had a nice presentation with them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would have liked to get something like that. That would have been cool. Plenty of people out there.
They sold out of them in, I think, like 3 weeks. They're all gone.
People email me stuff from Alton Towers, I believe it is, all the time. I think it's Alton Towers that stuff comes out of, where they will take old ride parts, stuff that you're sitting there when you're rebuilding something, you're like, oh, this one's no good anymore. And they'll make one thing I saw was the center of the B&M restraint, the actual like knuckle, the mechanical knuckle on the inside. And they literally just took that knuckle on its side and put a post in the center of it and put a light bulb at the top, and it was a lamp. And I was just like, that's really cool. That part was going to end up in the trash. And here they go. They're like, we're just going to do this and add an extra $10 of material to it. And now roller coaster geeks out there can pay. You could pay a ton of money for it. Actually, it was like a couple $100, I think, for it. But I was just like, that's pretty cheap when you consider what that thing cost brand new.
Right. Yeah.
Those things are expensive.
That's one thing.
Making bracelets out of the cages, out of some of the bearings from wheels. Yeah, that's cool. But
that's
just
thing I
for
was
him
not
and friends.
I'm sorry. That's one thing I was not prepared for. Was the Thoosies. No one can prepare you for that. I mean,
Nope.
you walk around the park, you see the same people every day. I'm like, and they're all riding the patches and the first ride. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was that big of a thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm good friends with a YouTube creator. She's just started her channel. I kind of also helped her. Like, she says, I was thinking about doing this, and I'm sitting there in the back going, yeah, you should go ahead, start it. But she started LT Coasters. She goes out to Cedar Point all the time, and she gets so many photos of rides working and those close up, what I call, nerd shots, just very close up of how the ride works and those intricate parts that people on this channel love to see. And all the time she'll message me and she said, swear I'm not breaking this thing down. But I was talking with maintenance, like every ride she goes to, I was talking with maintenance. So it's like, you've probably seen LT Coasters up there at some point in time at one ride.
Probably. I probably.
Yeah.
That was something that I was kind of like, oh, okay. I spent 15 years in a 4-wall factory. And I'm out in public.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to think about because you look at it, it's like basically you're working on machinery, right? It's like, okay, so it's weird to think about your machinery has its own following. It's got its own, it's alive. It's got its own people. It's got following. It's got its own lore. It's got all this stuff to it. And here you are, just like, I work on that.
Put grease in it.
Right. I put grease in, and there it goes. It comes out again. As I put grease back into it, comes out again. It's like, all right.
He goes up the lift hill, comes around, comes back to the station. That's all it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's pretty until you get that bad experience where you're like, it goes up, comes around, it's like it comes back. Like,
there's a couple spots on Iron Dragon where we're like,
yeah.
Over the lagoon. Before you hit the helix, it's like, is it? Oh yes, thank you.
Yeah. Just kind of close your eyes and just wait for the sound of the brakes. It's like, come on, let me hear those brakes. Come on, let me hear them. Like, yep, here they are.
Yeah. We had our launch coaster one time was having issues with the motors firing off, and it dropped like 5 motors, which makes a huge difference for the ride on a launch. And as soon as I saw it go up into the first inversion, I was like, oh no, that's real slow. And I was watching it get over, crest the top, and it almost came to a complete stop, and it just continued to come down. I was like, oh, thank God it's coming back. But yeah, that's never fun.
That's almost like a safety these days for launch rides, is having some sort of a top hat element being your next one, because if it makes it over that top hat, it'll finish the course.
Oh yeah.
And if it doesn't, it just rolls back into the brakes, and it's like, okay, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody learned early on that if you launch it into a little hill and then a bigger hill, it's like, nope, that thing's valleyed out there now.
Yeah. Unfortunately, ours is that way.
Oh my gosh, that's no fun at all.
No.
Well, my favorite ride in the valley is we have a Zamperla pipe screen. It's just 2 whoops on a central track, and if there's any moisture on track, we don't even test it because the drive tire will not make it up, and we'll smoke the drive tire. And if we valley it, it just gets stuck over the other side.
Yeah.
So it's no big deal.
Yeah.
It's not like we're standing over in man lifts with winches and hoists and trying to bring the thing back around. But no, that one's okay to valley, I guess.
Have you guys seen some of the Mac like spinners or something like this? It's just mainly a lot of the new Mac rides. All their stuff has LSM motors, it seems like, all over the thing. And that's really cool because anywhere you could stop it, you can pretty much recover it from too, right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that feature. That's so great. It's like, oh, if you want to stop right there, it's fine. Then just go ahead and, even if it's not long enough, we'll just keep seesaw the thing a couple times, back and forward, then just send it on out.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Mm-hmm. Even Velocicoaster is the same way. Going into the second launch up the top hat, if it doesn't make it, it'll just come back, swing backwards, and then relaunch it again. I'd love to catch a ride where it does that. That seems like it'd be a lot of fun. But yeah, that's the nice thing with the newer LSMs.
Yeah, that does seem like a lot of fun. I know we had a on the Premier or Skyrocket 2. That was the first design of that type. So we had put it in there, and they said, okay, it's got something like it had like 22 motors going up to the front, and they're like, if we need to, we have a spot for 4 more motors in the back if we need them. So when we started doing testing, we could not get it over the top. It would not go up and over the top. And Intrasys, who did the drive, they were online in Germany looking at all the data, and they were trying to figure out what the problem was. So they're like, okay, go ahead, because they had everything all set and ready to go for it. So it was like, okay, go ahead and install the other 4 motors. So like a couple days later, the motors were installed and everything was ready to go. And we were still doing that, and it was going up, and it was coming really close and then rolling back each time. And everyone was starting to get really worried because like Intrasys told Premier, they're like, yeah, we can do this. And like everything said that they could, but now here we were looking at it, it's like, nope, it's not doing it. And then it was like one late night at like, I don't know, 2:00 in the morning or something like that. They were on the phone. I wasn't there, but they were on the phone talking with them, and they mentioned something about the weight. And they were like, what did you just say? Because the Intrasys, they're in Germany. They're watching data on the screen. That's all they're doing. And they said, oh, well, we have the train loaded up with, it was some thing. We had it loaded so high with sandbags because it wasn't just like weight testing, like a load test. It was like max weight testing. So we had like, I don't know, like 350 pounds per seat loaded into there, just this extreme weight.
Oh my God.
And Intrasys, like a breath of relief on their end, because they're like, all the data and manipulation they were doing was for an empty train. That's what it was. It was for an empty train. They're like, oh, it's full of weight. Oh my gosh. Oh, so they're like, we could adjust the program, but they're like, no, and just take all the weight off of it and then run it. And it's like, took all the weight off of it, and then the first time, right up and over the first time, no questions asked. It's like, man, some of the funny things that happen there,
Now, were you responsible for putting the weight bags in?
So there was a miscommunication, because what happened was that.
I guess that's not the question. I mean, were you actually throwing the weight bags to your guys and they were putting them in the seats? I mean, were you just standing in a big line just checking these? Because that's how we do our weight bags. There's like 5 of us all in line. We're just like.
So yeah, we had we forklift a pallet up there and got the pallet right next to there, and then just kind of everybody's responsible for a seat.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure the guys were happy when they got to take all the weight bags out. You're like, oh my God.
Oh yeah, because we were using sandbags, and if you don't, viewers at home especially, when you use sandbags in a ride, they don't like to stay put. They like to move.
So you're sash-cording them all together.
Yes.
Then you're tying them down.
Yeah, and then they move, but you don't, like, a lot of times you don't know that they move. So they just move, and then they look fine every time the train comes back. It's like you try to move the restraint and try to do everything. It's like, well, yeah, okay. And then like, it's like we're like, for the Skyrocket, we were doing that exact thing, and then it goes up and it goes over that Heartline roll at the top where it just does that really slow inversion right at the very top, and here it comes. Actually, 2 of them, here they come, and they went right down. slammed into the station building underneath there,
Ooh.
broke 2 big holes in it. It was just like, oh my gosh. Okay. Other ones where it's like, I've lost a sandbag on almost every single coaster. It's just like our SLC, it threw a sandbag off, it hit the track, it pretty much just splits the bag in half and it flies off to the side. My favorite one was the floorless roller coaster, though. We lost a sandbag out of the back. It hit the track tie. We literally had to climb up there with a shovel because when the sand hit, it was kind of damp and it literally compacted itself right onto the rail tie, like thick. Had to go up there with a shovel and get the sand off of the thing. People would ask all the time. It's like, oh, well, when I talk about commissioning a roller coaster, just whether it be brand new or just from the off season, doing load testing. So people say, well, why do you always do load testing at night? I'm like, that's typically when the crew is freed up because you're not trying to take care of the park. But I mean, just in my previous experience, it's like it gives me chills if we were to try to load test during the daytime because if a sandbag came off, anything came off the train, because we also had a really close call on our impulse coaster where it was INTAMIN impulse coaster, adjusting the road wheel eccentrics using a big 2 1/4 inch wrench on the nut to just help lift and lower the wheel up and down. And the mechanic left that big 3-foot long wrench in the seat. In fact, one of the seats that I'm sitting on right now, left it in the seat pan, and the park was open. So we were making adjustments on it. He dispatched it and it ran out of the station, and he just happened to catch his eye and see that wrench as it went flashing by, and he just happened to hit the e-stop just in time. The coaster stopped and that thing flew out and hit the fence right in front of the pathway. It was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
That's bad.
I've been unlucky enough that I've never seen any of our rides lose water dummies. I've heard about the really cool stuff that happens when they've lost the water dummies, but I've never been there. But we have one. We just got new train modifications back from the manufacturer, and we're running cycles. And I guess the restraint is slightly different than the old restraint. So our water dummies that we were using previously didn't quite fit the same. And this ride is known for having quite a bit of airtime in it. And right as it comes off of the first inversion down the first hill up into the first moment of airtime, it just launches 2 water dummies just straight out. And luckily we have really big hills right at the end of that, next to that ride, and just smacked straight into the side of those hills and just blew up with water everywhere. I was like, man, I really wish someone would have gotten that on tape. I would have loved to have seen it.
Right? That's one of those things. It's like, that would have been cool to see on tape. And at the same time, it's like, nobody got that on tape, right? Like,
Yeah.
Nobody
Exactly.
had that, right? Like, that's not a thing. Like, no.
I think
Hold on. Let me finish sending this unrelated text message. No one got that.
Uh-huh.
The elephants in the room. See where it goes. What's everyone's warm and fuzzy feeling on Top Thrill 2?
mine.
I mean, it
well,
hasn't opened yet. We don't know what the modifications were. We don't know anything else, right? So everyone's sitting here in the dark, but we've got the official that the park said, Zamperla said that they got it fixed. Now, what I was looking at, I was watching the amount of testing that was happening. People would they were sending me videos and stuff like crazy for that.
Yeah.
So I was watching the amount of testing, and they're like, then the testing slowed down and stopped. So I was like, I was more comfortable when I saw testing stop, because I was like, okay, that tells me enough's been done. They're good with it. They've done the math. They've redone the math the best they could anyway. And I'm fairly confident that it's going to be a good thing.
I'm confident it's going to open for 2025. It is. I've ridden it 4 times before they closed it. It was just employee rides, And my God, it is a beast. That backwards launch is just it's second to none, because as soon as you hit that backwards launch and you hit that spike, you just watch the midway just go wow. It's the greatest thing.
Nice.
I mean, as soon as you hit your as soon as your speed dies off, you right before you start coming back down towards the station, if you just relax your body, you got like 5 or 6 seconds of negative G's just sitting there floating. It's just the greatest thing in the world.
Wow.
It is. And same with the top hat. As soon as you hit that top hat, you can just feel everything just kind of floating midair. It's the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, on that ride, the trains looked awesome, and everything looked really great with that. And then my problem was, a lot of people gave Zamperla a lot of crap, and it's just like, look, they were doing something like, okay, Intamin was the first one to build a ride that big.
Right.
It's like, okay. And then I just look at that on the other side of the coin and I say, well, now Zamperla is the first one that would manage to flip a ride that big. Like that's a pretty big milestone for any manufacturer, let alone to take over something else and completely retrofit 100% new solution on top of it. Like that was an incredible pain in the butt for Zamperla.
It was. I mean, it was. I mean, those lightning trains they're beautiful trains. I mean, the body panels are made out of carbon fiber. I mean, they're lightweight.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
I thought they were just their normal polyester fiberglass, carbon fiber, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That's nice.
Yeah, they are nice trains. And the way it's set up, I mean, they're in the harnesses, you just have this openness feel about it.
I got to sit in the show car they had at IAPA a couple years ago, and it's easily one of the most comfortable trains I've ever sat in.
Yeah, well,
it's super comfortable, and just like you said, just super openness, and all you have is that lap bar, and then nothing else.
Yeah,
I can't imagine actually feeling that on the ride.
Yeah, that has to add to the fear factor, doesn't it? I would think it would anyway, because I mean that's one thing, when you sit in a ride and you got, like you're down inside of a coach and you got your feet on the floor and your knees might be pinned up against guy my size, and knees are pinned up against the seat in front of me, it's like, okay, I'm in here, I'm not going anywhere. But then you take all that away and then it's like, okay, that opens up a different mental element there,
Yeah.
It's like, all right, like when I ride X2 at Magic Mountain, as you go over the top of the lift hill and you go down to that first drop and those seats rotate and you're face first down at the ground. Well, while the train's still picking up speed, you're just hanging in that restraint right there and everything's trying to go forward. You kind of get that mental in the back of your head, like, okay, we can we can speed up now. Come on, let's pick up some speed and get some G-force going here, because it's that little bit of a mental factor in there. It's like,
but I'm confident TT2 will open for opening, and it'll probably run flawlessly.
So while we're talking about Top Thrill 2, let's talk about a different experimental thing out there, which is one of those things. I'm not sure what I think about this, but I'm talking about the S&S Axis ride. Have you guys seen that design of that ride?
Yeah, it was actually on display at the same IAPA that I went to 2 years ago. That one they didn't let anybody sit in it, but it was on display. It was really cool. They had the piece of track on its side, and they had the whole coach just reaching out into the walkway with the seat right side up as they rotate. But yeah, I was looking all around that thing, seeing how it worked. But it's a really cool piece of machinery. I'm really excited to see it actually running and see what people have to think about it. But yeah, it was a really impressive design.
Richard, have you seen that one?
No, I have not. I don't get out much.
So no worries about that, because when I was, because I've been out of the industry now for 6 years, but it's one of those things. It's like if you had asked me 6 years ago, hey, have you seen this? Have you heard about this ride? Have you seen what this park is doing? I've been like, no, I haven't. It's like, well, what? You work at an amusement park. It's like, I know, I'm working. I got stuff to do. I do my thing, and then I leave and I go home. And it's like, what do you want to do at home? It's like, I don't want to talk about work.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
now here I am 6 years later, like, hey, anyone want to talk about work? Come on, it'll be fun.
Hey, it's just like my family at get-togethers. Once they found out I was working there, it was like question after question after question. And I'm like,
no, you're in it now. You're in it, whether you like it or not.
I realize that now, and I'm like, then you got the Thoosies and you got my family. I'm like, okay, well, I'll have to accept that fact of life. I'm
now
here.
Think about this weird little thing right now. This might blow your mind. You might be out at a trouble call or something one time, and someone might actually go, there's the guy from that Ryan the Ride Mechanic show.
Oh, see, I don't,
Yeah, that's right.
I work third shift, and that's when we do all the major coaster inspections.
Hey, you never know.
Yeah, you never know.
You never know.
They're over the first or second shift. I don't know.
You never know. Yeah, so the Access coaster is it's built by S&S Manufacturing, and basically it is, if you can imagine, like a pair of seats suspended kind of on a car mounted to the track, and then in the center of those seats is a pin that allows the car to go essentially all the way around, like 360 degrees around, but your body is kept level. You could take the track and then just make a hard right-hand U-turn, no banking, just flat, just go right around the corner, and your body is able to swing out and keep with inertia as it goes around. So it's a really interesting thing. You could just take the track and you can ride on it on top like a regular roller coaster, and then it can go around a corner and the track can just invert, and now you're hanging underneath, and now they're dipping you down close to the ground. It looks like some really unique ride elements. S&S actually built a full-size, I guess you call it, prototype at their factory in Utah. I think it is. Yeah. And the one that they built, it just goes up and does like a turn and a little hill and then comes back to a stop at the end. But it's their air launch system that powered that particular one. The one that's being installed, I'm not sure if it's a launch or if it's a lift hill on that.
I want to say they announced it as an LSM launch.
It's an LSM launch, which makes sense.
Yeah. But it's a very short layout, it seems like. But I think from what they unveiled about it, it goes around 2 laps. So you're still getting plenty of ride out of it. But yeah, it seems like it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, definitely seems like it's one thing to go, to ride. If you ever in the area near it, it's like, oh yeah.
That one's in the Middle East, I think, is going to be opening.
Is that where they're putting it?
Can't remember exactly where. Saudi Arabia, I believe. Yeah, at least the first one anyway. But
man, they're putting a lot of stuff out there. What's Qidibia? What's the name of that place where Intamin's building that?
Yeah, Six Flags Qiddiya.
Qiddiya.
Yeah, and
Falcons Flight. Yeah,
that one's going to be interesting too.
Do you guys think that'll work? I mean, so obviously Intamin's done the specs on it, and it's going to work, right?
Right.
But I mean, okay, longevity. So you go up 500 feet and go over a cliff. It's like, okay, and then you go up over this 500 and whatever it is, 50-foot top hat or this hill. That's the highest point where you'd be the highest, fastest roller coaster in the world. Okay, so the drop powers that? It's like, no. We still got to use the heck out of LSM motors down there in order to get you up over the top of that. It's like sand, extreme heat and temperatures. I kind of agree with some of the people that I think like this is just something that park is doing to just draw attention to it. And then, you know, like a couple years after this thing opens, they might just stop running it. Not because of maintenance costs or anything else, just because it's like a one-trick pony. They're like done with it.
Yeah.
And,
I'm not sure. Yeah, it's the whole hugeness of it is just bizarre. But it's for people who love roller coasters. I think it's probably going to be one of the holy grail roller coasters for at least a little bit. People are going to be wanting to ride it because just for the credit, just we rode the tallest, fastest roller coaster. Especially if it's really not going to last a whole long time. Which I can see that possibility on the maintenance side, just because all the sand and heat, like you were saying.
Well, you think about the logistics here. Like they opened up, what's the name of that? It's like Formula Rossa, which is the fastest ride in the world. And there they got to give people goggles to wear on their face because there's just so much wind coming by. I understand INTAMIN put that little like windscreen up on the front of their car, but at what point in time do you need to give people like, I don't know, almost like a helmet? Not saying their head's going to be damaged, but I mean just to like keep some of the forces off of a person's head at those speeds, you know?
Yeah.
That's some crazy stuff.
And I think Falcons Flight is going to be a novelty for a little while. Then they'll. I mean, personally, I would love to write it, just to say I wrote it. But then I start looking at the maintenance aspect of it. I'm like, how would you do your tracks?
How would you keep the sand out of all the bearings and pivots and everything else like that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it takes me, at least 2 hours walk around Gemini, and that's not that big of a ride. And that's, structure. That's looking at structure, looking for broken track bolts. And I couldn't imagine walking that in the sand, in the heat. It just seems, from the maintenance end, it just seems so. I don't know.
Yeah, you would need at least a couple parks worth of maintenance staff just for that ride. And break it up into sections. And people are there 24/7 because that just seems like it's going to be so much work.
I always like to look at the weakest link on that sort of stuff. And in my mind, it's, I don't know, maybe it's just the history I have with stuff, but in my mind, it's always the wheels. And I'm just thinking, okay, King Dakar and Top Thrill and those rides, it's like you get them up to that really high speed, but they don't stay there. No. But then, it's like, okay, Formula Rossa, they got it up to that speed and pretty much held it there. I'm just thinking, what do you have to do to make the wheels and everything live at that speed? Not to mention, if you use any sort of track lube and it holds any sand, I mean, it's going to wear your urethane off in like no time flat. I couldn't see using nylon. I'd literally worry about nylon being, shattered, flying apart at those speeds. One thing I remember is when they made at Magic Mountain in Southern California, they made Superman the Escape, which was INTAMIN's first chance of doing the whole 100-mile-per-hour launch, and it was going up a 400-foot spike. And I remember they had to make the road wheels, these experimental road wheels that were like 30 inches in diameter to, quote, handle the speed that the ride was going. And now I look at Falcons Flight, it's like those wheels don't look like anything special. Maybe we've just come that far in all the compounds and everything else that go on the wheels, but They didn't look like anything crazy special on that, supposedly maintaining speeds 120 plus miles per hour.
Yeah, they do have like fins and like spokes instead of a solid hub, which does seem interesting as a way to help cool it, to keep airflow through the hub of the wheel. But yeah, for sustained amounts of times and then cycle after cycle every single day, that I don't know really how long that those wheels would be able to hold up.
Yeah, I mean, they just melt from the inside out, and you'd have spider webs all over the place.
Yeah.
Just urethane, just
Yeah, urethane spider webs are no fun.
no.
They're not fun at all. So along those lines, I've seen rides where they didn't really wear the wheels at all. The wheels just kind of sat there, and they eventually just got hard and cracked, and that was the reason to replace the urethane on them. But then, like some of the wheels on our impulse coaster, they would cup really bad. You know what I mean? Like cupping, when they would just like take on the shape of the rail really bad. It's like, what it just you had mentioned Millennium Force. Like, does that do cupping really bad on there, or is that? I was always curious on rides. You know, which way does some
That
rides
one,
go?
that one doesn't cup very
Doesn't
bad.
really cup it that bad.
No, I don't know what compound they use, but we get just about all of our everything done at Euromet.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you showed a picture of a Vekoma wheel, you know, and it came off in at the end of this. Did you take that off at the end of the rebuild season, or? I mean,
No,
because
like
I
my
was just
failed
trying,
ones.
I was trying to understand the process, because even if a wheel has been on one day, we put it on, it still gets taken off, and everything we have gets shipped.
Yeah.
We don't like save like 3 or 4 or a half a train's worth of roads, guides, or uplifts. No, everything gets stripped, everything gets cleaned, everything gets shipped to Euromet.
See, so where we were is we did not have the spare parts and the alternate spare parts and stuff like that to do that sort of thing. And the park already had the history before I even got there of the wheels weren't tearing themselves up. We didn't get lots of cracking or anything else like that in them. So when it was like, oh, we need to buy an entire train's worth of wheels, the park was like, well, no, we don't, because we don't run them that hard. They're not getting torn up. It's like, okay, well, then how are you going to send all these out every year to get them resurfaced? And it's like, we don't. We've run them. In fact, personally, I've run those Vekoma wheels. I've run them 5-6 years in a row. Never had any problem with them. I do believe it's 100% based on the ride. Like,
Yeah.
you know, some rides like that Vekoma, those Vekomas, you can probably put 3, 4, 5 years on those wheels, no problem, and they will get dry and start to crack. And that's when it's like, okay, the urethane needs to be replaced. Other ones, especially a ride like Millennium Force, where it's blowing through speed so fast, it's one of those things where they don't want to take the chance. We're like, no, we don't want to blow out going 80 miles an hour. We don't want to pull urethane off of there. We don't want it sticking to the track and possibly blowing out other wheels. So, you know, early on in the ride's life, they just said, nope, every year we're going to do this. And they wrote it down, and they're like, that's what we're doing. End of story.
See, it's just that even our arrows, everything gets sent out. We don't reuse wheels at all unless we have enough spares to get us started during rebuild. Then by the time the ones we sent out come back and they're cured, and they have that best used by,
Yep.
Yeah.
And usually they're past that full cure date, and we just go ahead and finish off the rebuild with those, then we replenish our stock. I mean, the mine ride is not a very intense ride. That's it's a very tame coaster. Everything on that gets, all the roads, guides, get shipped off. It doesn't have uplifts on it. It's got a brass pad uplift. I mean, everything, everything gets shipped to Euromet.
We'll usually save ours for when we get down for a rehab. If we do have new wheels that were recently put on, we'll just keep those just in storage, just in case wheels. So for the train that's already on, we can just swap it out with those. Or if we get down to not having any new wheels that are ready to go on, we have at least some stock of wheels that we can pull from, especially for adjustments. Like on our launch coaster, we can find one that's worn similarly, so it's not like you have to go and realign that car in the middle of the day or something like that.
You know, one of the things that the older rides don't really have much of, they don't have much of that adjustment really needed. But I mean, it is one of those things, once the wheels start wearing, they wear faster. So from the adjustment point of view, on something like an INTAMIN ride where you got everything's adjusted, I could see replacing most of those wheels, or at least getting them retreaded each year. That way all your adjustments start back out at where they're supposed to be. Is there any rides coming up in 2025 that you've seen that might be like, wow, that looks really interesting, I can't wait to see that?
I remember what all is coming up this year.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So mine personally is the Siren's Curse.
Oh, yeah. Right, yeah.
The tilt track. And then and honestly, it's funny because Circuits of the Americas down there is in Texas. They've been installing one. Like, one's going in that park. Yeah. It's almost done. And then Cedar Point's like, we're going to put one in. And so now it's to the point where I think we're literally racing for the first tilt to see who's going to do it first. Who's going to send the first coach down that track the first time to say that they've got America's first tilt coaster.
Yeah. And at least the one at Circuit of Americas, like they've had the track sitting there since like 21 or 22, I think. And it's
a long time.
Yeah. So they've just been kind of, well, COVID originally kind of slowed everything down, and they've just been sitting on it, which is unfortunate for people who've been waiting for that coaster. But yeah, I'm excited for that one too. That one's relatively close to me, so that one's going to be a nice ride.
I'm excited for Siren's Curse. I know that one's. I refer back to the press release that they said it wouldn't be ready for opening day. It'll be ready for summer though. I'm hoping by July, maybe mid-June. I think it's going to be awesome. I mean, we weren't actually supposed to get that ride.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, that really wasn't. It was supposed to
go somewhere in Mexico, wasn't it?
Yeah, originally it was going to, I think, Energylandia in Europe, and then it was shipped to Mexico, and it was already in the parking lot, and then they couldn't get the permits, and then they shipped it all the way back up to Ohio.
Yeah, so we got it now.
Hey, that works.
Well, we had the space. We did have, because there used to be, we called that Celebration Plaza, because there was a stage and that's where they did a lot of the stage stuff for entertainment. So they had to take that out. They have to redo the queue line for Iron Dragon. They're completely redoing that entire midway. And I was over there today, and I'm like, well, obviously they had a big media day when they put the tilt on.
Yep.
And the tilt they're still working on the tilt, and we were over there today, and there's like actually track pieces starting to be put on columns. So I mean, it's starting to look like something now, instead of just a bunch of pylons being driven into the ground.
I just can't get over the tilt, the mechanics of the tilt track itself. And by that I mean how much it weighs and all the componentry that goes with it, to think that you not only have to set it and line it up in this axis, but then when it's vertical, it has to be lined up in this axis too, which means that anything you do here affects it here. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that has to be like They've got to be. I don't even know how you go about setting that. I understand most of it was done at the factory, and they probably, like Vacoma typically does with a lot of stuff, where they put those little shim blocks in and then weld them together, so it has to go back into that spot. But I mean, you're talking about a piece of track that big, thousandths of an inch, is going to be a pretty big misalignment on the other side.
Right.
Hope the surveying marks were done right,
I'm curious to see the train, see how the train looks, because it's supposed to have it's going to have LED lighting and audio too.
Nice.
I just
it's really cool
how it looks together.
Well, if there's one thing that I know, Vacoma builds all the stuff for Disney, and Disney they do a great job. They do a good job with the lighting. They do a good job with the audio package, because it's like when they design those coaches and stuff, that it has to meet that audio, especially has to meet a design criteria from Disney. They can't just say, "Oh, we put speakers on there. That's it." It's like, nope. In fact, I was a sales rep for a different company was explaining the audio process to me, how it has to hit all these different sound categories, and it's got to be in these right ranges. So he said the interior of the ride had to be finessed and redesigned constantly until the sound dynamics happened correctly inside. It was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. Here I was just thinking like, oh yeah, we put speakers in it too. It's like, nope.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Right?
I mean, for what it's worth, we're kind of a Disney family too. And we've been to Disney quite a few times. My wife went by herself back over the summer. She dabbles with travel agency work, and she handles Disney parks. So there's a train there, and she rode Guardians of the Galaxy Rewind. She's like, it was the most comfortable train. I'm like, yeah, it was probably a Vacoma.
Let's see. I think Vacoma, did they make that one?
Yeah.
I think they did, yeah.
Yeah.
She goes, it turned and twisted, and she goes, it wasn't rough, it was nice and smooth. I go, it's a Vacoma family coaster. It's not supposed to be, super intense like Maverick or Millennium Force or anything like that. I mean, it's a Vacoma family. I mean, it's gonna give you what you want, and that's what Disney is about, though.
You know the crazy part about that too? I was talking with somebody from that Disney park, and that was their ride, and the sequence to turn the coaches, because they're not just free spinning, they're powered to a certain location. How would you think that you would get that signal to start that rotation? Because this one blew me away when they said what it was. I was like, what?
I don't know. I'd probably have
photo eye, maybe.
You'd have to probably think it'd be like some kind of electronic cue or some kind of sound cue.
So I would always go with like the stuff that I've seen the most of would be like an RFID out on the track. Right. As the coach passes by, it scans the ID tag and it's like, oh, okay, move to like track number 6, and it scans the next one. It's like, okay, go to track number 7, or so it can link the audio and the spinning. It links everything together. This thing does it with a QR code. I was like, no, that's not the case. That can't be the case. Then this person sent me a picture of it, and I was just like, oh my gosh, are you freaking kidding me? That's like, oh, and then I thought about it. I was like, oh, that has to happen so fast. But then I think about these scanners, like assembly lines and stuff you use as they're scanning all these things that they go by like a super fast rate of speed. And I'm like, actually, the speed at which a ride moves is actually not that fast when you look at like assembly lines. They can get going really fast for that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah, my previous employer before I went to Cedar Point was a recycling facility, and we had high speed camera sorters. I mean, these conveyor belts were high speed, and there was a camera set up, and there was a robot set there with a vacuum. It just sat there and just would sort all the different colors of plastic in like no time flat.
Yeah. So where I work now, I work for a pharmaceutical manufacturing medicines out here, and these little tiny vials of medicine that go through there, when they're running those lines, they'll go through it 1,200 vials a minute. And each one, when it goes through this special camera system for that, it logs, because each vial has basically like a serial number on it. So the camera system actually takes a picture of that vial with the serial number and logs it and puts it in a box. Like, does all that 1,200 times a second. Like, that is fast.
Yeah. Impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's fine until something messes up, or you have a camera go down, and you're like, oh.
Yep.
And the neat thing about this system was there was an encoder wheel on the end of the conveyor belt to the motor, so it was constantly adjusting speed with how much trash was flowing. It was actually because the camera would pick up all the trash coming in, and it would throttle back the conveyor a little bit, so that way the robot had time to make decisions. Then as the flow would lighten up, the conveyor would speed up a little bit. And it was all done with an encoder at one end and the PLC and the robot communications at the other end. It's kind of a neat setup. There was 3 lines like that there.
That is really interesting.
Yeah. I'm sure some of that can come over into working on rides, at least having some sort of a knowledge of how that all operates.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was in industrial maintenance for 10 plus years, and I made the move to amusement park.
Yeah. I've always told people, and people ask like, oh, what do I need to do to get into the job or anything? And I'm like, aside from apply.
Right.
I always tell people the closest you can come to working on amusement rides anywhere else is an industrial mechanic. Someone that has automation, assembly line, controls, like hydraulic, pneumatic, like everything you'd find in an automation line is what you need, because that's essentially what rides are.
Yeah, I kind of started in fiberglass. My previous experience was working on wind turbines, and specifically the blades, building and repairing wind turbine blades, which are all fiberglass. I was able to transfer that, and I started in the fiberglass maintenance department at our park, and just kind of made my way over as I needed more help on the mechanic side. And it's interesting to see like the giant robots that we had in our factory, how similar they are to the large machinery that I get to work on now, and how they had similar ways of operating.
Yeah. And once you get that mindset in there, right, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, you press start, the machine goes from point A to point B, and then it stops and does something. So what happened this time? It went from point A, and then it just stopped midway and didn't do anything. So if you know anything about it, if you just think about how the machinery works, then the next question is like, okay, well, how does it know that it got to point B? It's like, is there a sensor that says I'm at B, or is it like an encoder that says I've done so many pulses, I must be at B now? When most of the time, it's a combination of stuff. My pulses say I'm at B, and then I've got a sensor also that says, yep, you've arrived at B. Go ahead and do whatever the next step is.
I mean, it's just a weird correlation. I mean, bearings are bearings, nuts are nuts, bolts are bolts, no matter where you go. If you're in a factory or in an amusement park, they all need to be tightened, they all need to be checked, and they all need to be greased.
Yep.
I mean, it's basically, our third shift is basically like PM, preventive maintenance. If we show up to a ride, the ride ops will write, and we have they've got sheets that they can write down, heard noise, blah, 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 or, harness won't release, or broken seatbelt or whatever. Then obviously we get that, and we're like, okay, we'll fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll take care of it. We'll sign off on it, and we'll give them back the papers, and they turn it in. So it's no different than, when I worked in a factory, I'd get a PM paperwork. Then there'd be like, oh yeah, while you're doing your PM, can you look at this as well? Because it was, kind of making a funny noise along with, your PM. It might have not been directly something I checked on the PM, but it was something that they had said, well, can you look at that too, please?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's really no different than working in a factory, except I'm not bound by four walls. I mean, I have seen some beautiful sunrises. That's
Yeah.
that's the thing. I mean, nothing like being on top of a coaster and looking out and seeing like one of the most beautiful sunrises over Lake Erie. I mean, it is like some of the greatest, one of the greatest things in the world. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy my job.
Mm-hmm. It's one thing I enjoy doing, especially whenever I'm on V&M that we have, and I'm doing the morning inspection. I take my cup of coffee with me, and I'll just stand there and watch the sunrise and just have my cup of coffee. Just 5-minute break, just a cup of coffee, watch the sunrise for a little bit, and keep going. Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite types of mornings.
When I was over on Maverick, there's a coal dock over on the other side of the bay in Sandusky Bay. And just watching these big coal freighters come in this little channel. I mean, all lit up at night. It's just, and they're so close. It's just something, you're just standing there, you're like, wow. If I was in the factory confined by walls, running from maintenance call to maintenance call to maintenance call, putting out fires here, putting out fires there, it's something you don't,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that you actually enjoy.
Yeah.
It's like, it makes it worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was similar when I was working in the factories too. Is even if on the day shift in the middle of winter, I wouldn't see the sun. I'd be going to work before the sun came up. Be going home when the sun went down.
Yeah.
And I never got, like, we'd work on the blades there, and then they'd be sent off, and that was it. But here it's kind of nice, especially when I do work the day shift when the park's open. Like, my immediate work is being shown off to all the guests, thousands of people a day, and I can see that they're enjoying it. So that's I really enjoy that part.
Yeah, we had an extended. I understand that we had an extended ride time on Maverick, and I had to, it lasts like 1:00 in the morning. And I've got to do my inspection. I mean, that's 6 trains and huge low zone to walk on that thing. And it's all broke up, in different sections. But just sitting there, standing up there at the exit, watching the people enjoy the ride was just like, yeah, that's kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
definitely job satisfaction.
Yeah, it kind of makes it worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
People, coming up and thanking us for the job we did, for the jobs we do. I mean, that's something I never had before in a factory.
Nope.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
And it kind of put it in perspective, it's like, yeah, this is kind of a unique job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll go back around one time and say, any closing thoughts? Let's see, Adrian, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to say, or anything you want to plug or anything like that while you're on?
Not really anything in particular. I just appreciate, channel that you have and what you do and the information that you're putting out there. To me, it's really fun information. I love to talk about what we do. So I'm really glad that there's someone else out there who's spreading it a lot more than I do, and making it fun also. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for doing what you do too.
Thank you.
Richard?
I just want to say, thank you. I appreciate your channel a lot. I watch it. I even your Sunday shorts, your safety Sunday shorts, those are funny.
I try. I try to have some fun with those.
But I enjoy your channel, and I enjoy what you do, and you've actually kind of helped me in a way with my career. Because at one time I was like, but after watching a few of your maintenance videos, I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, this is definitely a career choice for me then.
It'll definitely give you a lot to talk about for a long time.
Yeah, I hate it. I'm like, well, especially when it came to TT too, I was like, God, how does he know so much?
It's the years of it's my that's realistically all I'm doing. I'm using my past experience and what I see, because people, that's what they do. They send me videos.
Right.
And I don't have someone with all the background knowledge of people, dumping information into me. It's just like I look at the videos, I watch people's stuff as they goes by, and I'm like, in my head, this makes sense. This doesn't make sense.
Right.
I could see them doing this. I could see them doing this too. It just doesn't really make much sense as to why they would do it, but here it is. And just my perception of the world as it is. That's realistically it.
Yeah, but I appreciate your channel, and it's a good channel. I'm subscribed to it, obviously, but
Thank you.
I just want to thank you for inviting me to this roundtable. Hopefully, we can do it again some other time.
There you go. Well, thank you for showing up, and thanks for doing what you do. I appreciate it. Let's see. For everyone out there, make sure you like, subscribe, do all that stuff downstairs. It does help me out. I do appreciate it. And the last thing, what's the last thing we got to do?
Stay off the air gates.
Come on, Adrian. Yeah, stay off the air gates. All right. I'm Ryan the Ride Mechanic. Thank you very much, Richard and Adrian, being on. Take it easy. Good night.
Yep.
And my turn. Stay off the air gates.